Last night, television history was made in the most explosive way imaginable. What was supposed to be another lighthearted episode of The Seth Rogen Show, filled with stoner jokes and celebrity interviews, turned into a political earthquake when former President Donald Trump walked onto the stage. The audience, a volatile mix of Hollywood liberals and die-hard MAGA supporters, erupted into chaotic cheers and boos, so loud the sound engineers struggled to balance the audio. Seth Rogen, usually the king of laid-back humor, found himself in uncharted waters as Trump systematically dismantled every joke, every insult, and every preconceived notion about how these interviews are supposed to go. By the end of the night, the internet was in flames, late-night TV's formula was exposed as hollow, and one question burned in everyone's mind. Did we just witness the death of political comedy as we know it? The moment Trump's name boomed, through the studio speakers, the carefully controlled environment of the Seth Rogen Show descended into beautiful chaos. The audience, typically a docile collection of Hollywood insiders and comedy nerds handpicked for their predictable reactions, suddenly became a microcosm of America itself. MAGA hats materialized like wildflowers in spring, their wearers whooping and hollering with the fervor of a Trump rally. Meanwhile, the show's usual demographic of liberal millennials clutched their artisanal cocktails like security blankets, their boos and hisses creating a dissonant harmony with the cheers. Backstage, producers scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked over, whispering into headsets and making frantic hand signals to the camera crew. Rogen himself, usually the picture of laid-back confidence, kept nervously adjusting his glasses and running fingers through his perpetually messy hair, his usual joint nowhere to be seen. A telling absence that spoke volumes about the gravity of the moment. Rogen opened with what he clearly thought was a clever gambit, a joke so safe and predictable it might as well have been written by algorithm. "So, Mr. Trump," he began, that trademark stoner chuckle bubbling beneath his words, "after everything, the tweets, the headlines, the memes, do you ever wake up and think, wow, I really became a cartoon villain?" The studio audience, conditioned, like Pavlov's dogs to laugh at anything their host said, obliged with dutiful chuckles. But Trump didn't play along. Instead, he did something revolutionary. He treated the question seriously. Leaning forward with the intensity of a prosecutor about to cross-examine a key witness, he locked eyes with Rogen and said, "Seth, let me ask you something." His voice dripping with the quiet confidence of a man who'd faced far tougher opponents. "When's the last time you created a job? Or built something that wasn't just a punchline?" The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear a pin drop in the control booth. Rogen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his comedy writer's brain visibly short-circuiting as it tried to process this unexpected turn. What unfolded next was nothing short of a masterclass in media combat. Trump, the reality TV veteran turned political juggernaut, treated Rogen's comedy stage like a debate podium, systematically dismantling every attempted joke with cold, hard facts delivered with the precision of a sniper. When Rogen tried to score points with a quip about unemployment, Trump didn't just counter, he eviscerated. 3.5% unemployment, he stated, the numbers rolling off his tongue with the ease of a man who lived and breathed statistics. Lowest in 50 years. Your writer's room probably doesn't even know what that means. The audience, conditioned to expect mindless entertainment, suddenly found themselves leaning forward in their seats, some even pulling out phones to fact-check in real time. When Rogen smirked about infrastructure, Trump didn't just respond. He painted a picture, listing specific highways, bridges, and factories, naming towns and job numbers with the familiarity of someone who had actually visited these places rather than just read about them in briefing books. The shift in the room was palpable. What began as a comedy show was transforming into something far more substantive before everyone's eyes. What unfolded over the next segment was nothing short of a masterclass in media combat and political rhetoric. Trump, the reality TV pioneer turned political phenomenon, treated Rogen's comedy stage with the same gravity as a presidential debate. Podium, systematically dismantling every attempted joke and gotcha question with a combination of cold, hard facts and the unshakable confidence of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. When Rogen tried to score easy points with a quip about unemployment figures, Trump didn't just counter, he eviscerated the premise with surgical precision. 3.5% unemployment, he stated, the numbers rolling off his tongue with the ease of a man who had spent years immersed in economic data. Lowest in 50 years. Your writer's room probably doesn't even know what that means. Too busy smoking weed and watching Rick and Morty reruns to understand how the real economy works. The audience, conditioned to expect nothing more substantial than celebrity gossip and stoner humor, suddenly found themselves leaning forward in their seats, some even pulling out their smartphones to fact-check the statistics in real time. When Rogen smirked his way through a joke about infrastructure spending, Trump didn't just respond. He painted a vivid picture of American renewal, listing specific highways, bridges, and manufacturing plants, naming towns and job numbers with the familiarity of someone who had actually visited these communities rather than just read about them in briefing books. The transformation in the room was palpable. What had begun as a typical late-night comedy show was evolving into something far more substantive and consequential before the viewer's very eyes. The defining moment of the interview, the clip, that would be shared millions of times across social media platforms, came when Rogen, visibly flustered and desperate to regain control of the conversation, played what he clearly believed was his trump card. A carefully edited compilation of Trump's past remarks, expertly spliced and diced to make the former president appear incoherent and buffoonish. It was a trick as old as television itself, one that had worked on countless politicians before him. But Trump didn't just call out the deceptive editing, he turned the moment into a devastating critique of modern media itself. "You cut that, Seth," he said, his voice carrying the disappointed tone of a principal addressing a cheating student. "You and your editors, and you have the nerve to call me dishonest?" The silence that followed was so complete one could hear the faint squeak of Rogen shifting uncomfortably in his chair. The comedian's usual arsenal of sarcastic comebacks and stoner wisdom suddenly seemed pathetically inadequate against this direct assault on his journalistic integrity. Trump, sensing the seismic shift in the room's energy, turned to address the audience directly, his voice taking on an almost evangelical quality. "They don't want you to hear the whole story," he said, gesturing broadly to the production crew and the broader media apparatus. "They just want you laughing too hard to think critically about what's really happening in this country." The applause that followed wasn't the polite, perfunctory clapping of a studio audience. It was a thunderous, visceral roar of validation from people who suddenly felt seen and understood in a way they never had on a comedy program before. The interview's conclusion was as dramatic as its beginning. As the segment wound to its scheduled close, Trump stood abruptly, declining to participate in whatever light-hearted comedic bit Rogen had planned for the finale. "I don't do puppet shows, Seth," he said with a dismissive wave that somehow managed to convey both amusement and contempt, striding off the set with the confidence of a man who had just proven his point beyond any reasonable doubt. The camera caught Rogen's face in that unguarded moment, a fascinating mixture of shock, begrudging admiration, and the dawning realization that his show might never be quite the same again. Within minutes, social media platforms were ablaze with reactions. "Trump destroys Rogen" trended worldwide within the hour, the clip of Trump calling out the edited video racking up millions of views before the show had even finished airing on the West Coast. Political commentators across the ideological spectrum scrambled to analyze what had just occurred, while comedy writers and late-night veterans tweeted their dismay at seeing their craft so thoroughly deconstructed on their own turf. Even Trump's most vehement critics were forced to concede. This wasn't just another celebrity interview.
It was a cultural moment that laid bare the emptiness of much contemporary political comedy, a revelation that would have lasting implications for how politics and entertainment intersect in the digital age. So here's the profound question that
media analysts, political strategists, and cultural commentators will be debating for years to come. Did America just witness the long overdue death knell of superficial political comedy? Was this the moment when the carefully constructed artifice of late-night television, with its reliance on cheap shots and deceptive editing, was finally exposed as intellectually bankrupt? Or was this simply a uniquely skilled media performer, running circles around an unprepared comedian on his home turf? The implications are staggering, for journalism, for political discourse, for how citizens consume information in an era of unprecedented media manipulation. What do you think? Was this interview a watershed moment in media history, or just exceptionally compelling television? Share your thoughts below, and whatever you do, spread this analysis far and wide before the gatekeepers of mainstream discourse decide it's too dangerous to be seen. The truth has a way of slipping through the cracks, unless we make sure it doesn't.